Bueno, buenas tardes todos. So good to be with you all. My name is Shamsher Virk,
Me
and
alegra
I'm
mucho
the
estar con ustedes
program
acá.
director
Mi
of
nombre es
American
Shamsher
Arts
Berg,
Incubator.
soy el director del programa
American Arts
American
Incubator is
Arts Incubator.
actually a
Este es un
collaboration
programa
between Zero
que es
One,
una colaboración
a
entre Zero
US-based
One,
arts nonprofit in San Francisco,
una organización sin ánimo de lucro en San Francisco, una
and the
organización
US Department of State.
del
In this
Departamento de
case,
Estado de los
we are
Estados Unidos.
working directly with the US Embassy
Nosotros
in
trabajamos
Bogotá.
directamente con la Embajada de los
And I would
Estados
like to
Unidos en
thank
Bogotá.
Jay Rahman,
Me gustaría
Xavier Billingsley, and Leila
agradecerle a
Moreno,
Jay Raman,
who
a Sadie
worked
Benning y a
diligently
Leila
with us
Moreno,
to set up
quienes
this
han
program,
trabajado con nosotros para
introduced
organizar
us
este programa.
to these amazing partners in
Son unos socios
Barranquilla,
maravillosos.
and
También nuestros socios del MAM
have
en
a public exchange like this. So I'm
tener
very
un
proud to be
intercambio
serving.
público como este es genial. Me siento muy orgulloso por poder.
We were hoping to be joined by
Esperábamos
Maria
que
Eugenia
se nos
Casas,
uniera
who's
hoy
the director of
María
the
Eugenia,
Museo de Arte
la
Moderno.
directora del Museo de Arte Moderno de Barranquilla.
Sadly, she's not able to be with us at this moment.
Desafortunadamente, ella no puede
I would just
acompañarnos
like
en este
to
momento.
acknowledge her and all the
Y
hard work
quisiera
she's put into
reconocer, hacerle un reconocimiento a ella y a todo el trabajo duro que le ha puesto.
to work with
Es
participants
una gran
in
oportunidad para trabajar con
Arts
participantes en
Technology
Barranquilla,
Incubator, addressing a social challenge. In
este
this
programa
case,
de incubadora,
migration.
tratando un reto, un desafío social, en este
So
caso la inmigración.
what we did as this arts nonprofit
Lo
in
que
San
hicimos
Francisco is
como
we
una organización
selected
sin ánimo de lucro en
a
San Francisco
roster
es
of
que
highly
elegimos
qualified,
de
socially
una,
engaged new
de
media
una
artists
lista de
across the United States.
participantes,
Wendy Levy, who has
de artistas
artistic skill and
que
technical
trabajan con
skill
nuevos medios, y escribimos a Wendy Levy, quien tiene una
in this
grandes habilidades artísticas.
We pair these artists with local partners in
Nosotros juntamos a estos artistas con socios locales,
Museo de Arte Moderno,
en este caso el MAM,
Barranquilla.
el Museo de Arte Moderno del
And
Barranquilla.
what we do is we find a location for
Lo que
these
hacemos
artists
es que
to
encontramos
work with local
una
participants
locación
on
para
a
que estos
challenge that's
artistas
relevant to
trabajen
that location.
con
So they're able
participantes
to share
locales
skills that they know well
y acá
and learn at the
comparten
same
sus
time
habilidades
about a new issue in a new context.
y trabajan sobre un tema nuevo dentro de un nuevo
Originally,
contexto
this
también.
was meant to be an
Originalmente,
in-person cultural exchange.
esto
But
iba a ser un
as you all know,
intercambio
we
cultural en
are
persona, pero como
currently
bien saben todos ustedes,
experiencing the shared and communal
estamos
experience of
experimentando
the pandemic, a global pandemic.
los efectos de la pandemia
That
global.
has caused us to have to switch our
Esto ha hecho
normal mode of operating.
que tengamos que cambiar nuestro
And
modo de operación.
we come up with this model for virtual exchange.
Y entonces
instead of
desarrollamos este modelo
being
para un
on the
intercambio
ground
virtual.
in person, giving this
Wendy
artist
quisiera estar allá en persona dándoles esta
Wendy
charla.
is here to share with you all, the global audience, and with the
Wendy está acá
participants
para
who are doing
compartir con
workshop
todos
and leading
ustedes,
activities, her work.
los participantes.
So I won't spend much more time talking
Entonces,
about
no voy a pasar
to
mucho más
pass the
tiempo.
microphone to Wendy, and
Y quisiera darle la palabra ahora a Wendy,
but I would like to thank you all again for joining us on this live stream.
pero quisiera agradecerles una vez
Especially
más a
thank
todos
you
ustedes por
bienvenidos
acompañarnos en
to
este
the
streaming.
participants who will be working with Wendy over the course
Gracias a todos los participantes que van a trabajar con
For
Wendy
everyone else, I
también.
hope you'll stay along with us for this
Y a
journey.
todos, espero que
And
se
also
mantengan con nosotros
join us
por
for
este recorrido.
the end of the month, where we'll be sharing
Y al
projects
final del mes
by
compartiremos los proyectos.
Wendy. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Thank
Wendy,
you,
gracias
Shamsher.
y te doy la palabra.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Shamsher.
Hello, everyone.
Hola a todos.
I hope everyone who is listening
Espero que todos los que
is
están,
in a
los
safe place.
participantes, están en un lugar seguro.
Thank you so much for being here.
Muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Before I get started,
Antes de
I
comenzar,
just want to let everyone know that
quisiera
if
hacerles
there are
saber a todos
questions along the
que si
way,
tienen preguntas,
Arina will be
Irina
monitoring the Q&A.
va a estar monitoreando la sesión de preguntas, el
So
Q&A, la
please
sesión de preguntas y respuestas.
Please just click on the Q&A
Entonces,
button.
por favor, que
And
hagan clic en el botón que dice Q y A.
we'll hold those questions till the end, and
Y
then
nosotros
we'll
dejaremos
jump
esas
in.
preguntas
And
para el final y al final las responderemos.
okay, so I just want to check before I continue.
Bueno, entonces antes de
Felipe,
continuar, quisiera confirmar con el intérprete Felipe.
Felipe is interpreting, but Felipe, yesterday I didn't hear
Felipe
the Spanish.
Está
Today
interpretando,
I
pero
hear the
Felipe,
Spanish,
yo ayer no
which is
escuchaba
fine. I
pero
just,
hoy sí lo escucho.
I wonder if I,
Esto está bien, pero me pregunto si...
should I just keep going? Can everyone
Oh.
hear, who needs to hear the Spanish, hearing the Spanish, we think?
Wendy, do you have original audio muted?
No, now I do. All right, beautiful.
Maybe let's try that. Say something.
Okay.
I'm going back to Spanish.
All right. And here I am speaking. Are you translating? And now I cannot hear you. So that's good. We're all good now. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, beautiful.
I was speaking.
Okay, good. So welcome, everyone. I apologize if this talk sounds a little awkward at times. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and generally speak very quickly. And so I'm working on speaking slower to enable Felipe to accurately translate for me, for you, for us. So if it's a little bit strange, please forgive me. I also have slides and notes so I don't forget, but just know my heart is in it and hope that you can, that everyone can understand. I'm going to share my screen of slides just to give a sense of what's happening. Where is my share screen? Here it is. And I will hold on until it comes up. And there it is. I hope folks, Felipe, can people see my screen, do you think?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'll get started. So again, thank you. I'm so sad that I could not be in Barranquilla this month. But thanks to 01 and this American Arts Incubator, I will get to spend some time with 32 artists from Colombia, Venezuela, and the area during the entire month of May. We get to spend this time together virtually rather than in person. So I'm excited about today getting started. The work of Laboratorio and las Fronteras will start tomorrow in collaboration with the Museo de Arte Moderno. What we're going to be focusing on is the issues at the Colombian-Venezuelan border region before, during, and after this pandemic. But the pandemic is real. The lived realities of migration, statelessness, family separation, and poverty, these are real as well. And we are in a time where so much about how we live is at once illuminated and also erased in the shadow of COVID-19. So we have a challenge to face together. We're calling this incubator Laboratorio en las Fronteras in order to center the artist's voice in the urgent issues of the border region and showcasing the power of imagination. The idea is to leverage image making and technology together to discover and amplify narratives in a process that itself can be an engine for change. We're not just taking pictures, telling stories. There's something deeper we'll be exploring. So I've been lucky in my career. After studying ethnopoetics and theater in college and leading cultural arts festivals in the Bay Area in California, I went to film school to study documentary filmmaking. After a very brief success with a few short films, I ended up finding my true voice, facilitating creative development of more collaborative projects on the border of storytelling and interactivity, projects that forged new relationships and connections between artists and their communities, artists and technologists, artists and activists. I found that there's so much that we can learn together about the values and ethics of co-creation and media production, about the human-centered use of emerging technologies and design, the centering of traditionally marginalized voices and bodies, and the persistent power of story to transform, heal, and bear witness. Before I dive into a few stories about my own work, I think it will be helpful to define some terms that we share that often resist categorization. Terms like digital media, new media, emerging media. What do all these words mean? What is their reference point? Why are we spending so much time in this space of digital storytelling, technology, creative coding? The idea of what is new changes every day, right? The day, I remember this story all the time. The day I graduated from film school, where I learned to hand cut 16mm celluloid film, was the day, almost to the exact day, that the first version of Final Cut Pro was released. Then the hot new editing software. So basically, analog filmmaking was over as soon as I got my degree in it. It was not a good day for me. But because it's hard, if not impossible, to make a living as an independent filmmaker, I also owned a restaurant in Oakland before the internet, before beautiful websites, before online video and social media, before cell phones, before Instagram, Yelp, and Facebook, before all of it, before digital media was really born. So today, things are different, yes? Digital media has grown up a little. We Zoom here, we live stream, we TikTok. Digital media occupies the universe with us, and sometimes in a scary way. Digital media, for me, is a blend of technology and meaning. Technology and content, technology and stories, technology and experience. Now, we're in the era of augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I mean, think about it. We can talk to people who died in the Holocaust through holograms. We can hold our phones to the air, identify a song we love when we hear it, and buy it. We can put on a headset, look at a point in space, and go flying off into the digital universe. We can experience larger than life photographs and become part of their metadata. We can go online, co-create an original work of digital art about Johnny Cash. That's the top images that you see on the screen right here. That is a co-created work of digital art about Johnny Cash, made together by total strangers. And it can premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, which it did. We today can virtually accompany human rights activists on the front lines of protests around the world. This is our new digital media universe. And if you can tell, I work in this space and I am in awe of it still. But as an artist and producer, value-laden social practice is what centers my work. And this comes with a certain set of questions. Questions like, how do we engage and collaborate with others? How do we give stories back to the communities we take them from when we film our projects? How do we share power as an integral part of the work? I mean, where we put the camera when we decide to film is ultimately less important than who is excluded from the storytelling. As social practice artists, we interrogate the ethics of the digital tools and platforms we use and anchor the conversation in the project of healing and repairing the world. I mean, not every project we make heals and repairs the world from its brokenness, but it's something that underscores so much of what we do. And as we do that, we must be ready, girded for the next wave of technology to emerge, because it will soon. And that technology belongs to us. As a young filmmaker, as a young artist and producer, I worked at re-articulating and re-photographing home movie footage into new and unexpected narratives. This little girl in the picture you're seeing is my mother. My first film, Naomi's Legacy, was based on home movies shot by a grandfather, her father, a man I never knew. When I was in film school, my mother found in her closet in Brooklyn the very first cartridge load 16mm camera that was ever available to non-professionals, and a box of film reels that her father had shot in the 1930s. This was new media. It's old media, but it was new media for us. And it was new media back in the 1930s. So the film, I used that camera to shoot new footage, and I re-photographed the old images. The film I made explored 3 generations of women's experience in an immigrant Jewish family, my family, and the broken bonds of the relationship between mother and daughter and father and daughter. In my film, the home movies are not left whole. They are interrupted, truncated, looped, re-photographed, and ultimately completely re-articulated to uncover a family story of abuse and eventual reclamation of identity. That project unexpectedly healed my family as an unanticipated outcome of the work. The horror of the behavior of the grandfather whom I am named after and never knew. We changed the story inside the film. And now, today, it feels like that work has led me here, to this place, this virtual place where I both embrace and resist technology as a mode of storytelling. It's funny, I actually hate technology in more ways than I love it, but I also love it in ways I did not anticipate. As an artist, as a human being, I want art to be intimate and the technology invisible. I don't want my phone between me and the world. I want to see and make raw, uninflected images that hold emotional crevices. I want the voices and the bodies of those most persistently silenced to ring out their truth. I got to ring out mine. And now I get to work on my own invisibility. It's extraordinarily freeing. At some point in my creative practice, I turned away from making my own projects and became a visual, human-centered ethnofuturist. That's meant to be funny, by the way. Obsessed with the intersections of celluloid, pixels, and codecs, and the social and cultural implications of the transition we are all in from analog to digital to virtual, especially in documentary. I'm obsessed by true stories. I got a job a long time ago at the Bay Area Video Coalition in San Francisco, and I created a lab there called the Producers Institute for New Media Technologies. It was the very first new media lab in the United States for documentary filmmakers and journalists. It was 2007. The internet was new. Filmmakers did not think they needed websites because they were storytellers. But we could see up close the power of having artists, technologists, and activists together, like we're doing now, but in person, co-creating new ways to tell stories, turning audiences into communities, using the latest interactive tools to expand the creative boundaries of traditional storytelling and move the needle on building a better world. This is not every artist's way of making work. I totally get that. But there is a tribe of us out there, and gatherings like Laboratorio and Las Fronteras and the Producers Institute are designed to tend to those artists. The projects and artists that emerged from the Institute changed me forever and changed storytelling. Many of these artists are still some of my closest colleagues and friends. We went through something together then. It was a new language we were learning. A woman named Nani De La Pena came to the lab as a documentary filmmaker and science writer, and she left as the first virtual journalist in Second Life. That's a virtual world, still around. At the Institute, she created this project you see here called Gone Gitmo, which was a replica of Guantanamo Bay Prison in Second Life that your avatar could walk through and feel what it was like to be thrown behind bars wearing an orange jumpsuit. She designed this whole platform with another artist named Peggy Weil. It won numerous awards, and not just arts awards, but human rights awards. The idea back then was that we would take the site down when Guantanamo Bay Prison closed. Sadly, that day never came. Nani went on from the Institute to break open the field of VR, and she was recently named the godmother of virtual reality. Her projects, Hunger in America, Project Syria, Use of Force, and many others, changed the vernacular of virtual reality and created inextricable connections between nonfiction film, immersive technologies, and social justice. There is a deep connection there. It's our job to find it. It was certainly Nani's goal in life to find it and explore it. Her 2017 project, We Who Remain, which was made in collaboration with the New York Times, is the first VR film shot in an active conflict zone. So in our lab this month, we'll get to explore Nani's newest platform, designed with her team at emblematic group that's called Reach.love. It's the first web platform for creating, remixing, and sharing volumetric virtual reality using real people and places. I think the idea is that we start to help the technology become more invisible and become more immersed in stories that might change the world. So there's a few other projects that I tended to at the Institute that I'd like to tell you about. Perhaps they'll be inspiring. Perhaps they'll raise questions that we might be able to ask in our own work. Also coming out of the lab was a project called Question Bridge, Black Males. It was an interactive, multi-screen, transmedia museum exhibition and a film, a book, an interactive website, and a mobile app that explored Black male identity. The experience of it, it was amazing. It was a multi-layered conversation. It took place as an immersive art installation, and it was also a curriculum, a feature film, a social construct that reimagined cultural identity in a number of ways through responsive video questions and answers, images at scale, and deeply interrogative personal narrative. After the Institute, Question Bridge Black Males premiered at Sundance New Frontiers, and it has been curated and is in permanent collections in some of the coolest museums in America. It opened simultaneously at the Oakland Museum and the Brooklyn Museum in public programs. During free nights, I know that the Oakland Museum has never been more packed. It was really extraordinary. Events are built around it. Community programs emerge from it. New projects are inspired by it. When I work on any project these days, I find that it is still a very good idea to remain platform agnostic until the last moment. Before deciding on technology, we go deep with the story, the subjects, the audience, and the purpose. I mean, unless you're making a project that's expressly designed to demonstrate a new piece of technology, the answers lie within the story, within you, within your community. I mean, each new place that Question Bridge appeared, all of the different platforms that were created for it, was not a replication of what was already in the world. It was a new part of the story and a new way to experience it. So also at the Institute, one other artist that I'm thrilled to tell you about, who I've worked closely with over the years, is Lynette Woolworth. She's an extraordinary Australian artist, filmmaker, and friend whose immersive video installations and film works reflect on the connections between people and the natural world and the nature of a resilient humanity. Her stories are really made for today. I learned about the power of projection and augmented reality from Lynette, of what it means to feel transformed by holding that transformation in your body. She is an artist who experiments with the latest technologies to deliver powerful true stories, and it is her deeply held relationships with Indigenous communities that she films that facilitates her many projects. Her last two masterworks in particular, Collisions and Awavana. While working with the Martu and Yawanawa tribes to make these virtual reality films, the challenges of glitchy technology could have been barriers to production. But in Lynette's co-creative practice, there was patience and vision. She says, and I quote her now, "That's why I persist in doing these works. For the things we don't know, for the things we can experience, and for the bridges that they can create between us." I find that to be extraordinarily important. When I think about Laboratorio and las Fronteras that we are about to begin, I say let us use photography, film, and digital tools to find answers that we could not otherwise find, to ask questions that we might be too frightened to face, and to bring us closer together in a time when proximity is dangerous. So as a final project to share with you, a few years after the Producers Institute, as part of the Alliance for Media Arts and Culture's Innovation Studio program, I directed the Oakland Fence Project, which is an interactive photography installation where 6-foot documentary photographs made in community were embedded with video. I worked with the amazing creative technologist Anselm Hook, who's now the head of AR and VR at Mozilla, and videographer JJ Harris from Oakland, and curator Ashara Ekundeo. And together we developed one of the first story-based AR apps that enabled the subjects in still images to speak, to move, to come to life. But it was, I still get the shakes thinking about it. No bells and whistles, no QR codes, no animated characters popping out of nowhere, just the device you hold in your hand, like an extension of your body, being used to open the possibilities embedded in the photographs with the stories and voices rarely heard. I'll demonstrate it for you tomorrow. We're currently reworking the app as a web-based tool and hope it will be available soon for free for everyone, which is how these tools should be. So I think that's my talk. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, for your presence here with me. And I love that there's so much more to say and so much more to learn from all of you. I wonder how it will be to lead a story circle online with artists who speak a different language through a translator, another layer of meaning lost and then found again. I wonder how it will be to explore visual storytelling, technology, ethics, and accountability without being able to look closely into the eyes of the artists and subjects, and to explore ideas in community when we've never met even once in person. How might I best help participants connect with one another, pay attention through the Zoom squares, and give voice bravely to your own stories, not really knowing who's listening? Can we possibly create a virtual lab without any in-person connection and interaction? I think we can. Who am I to think that we could move this experience online and actually incubate projects that will explore migration, statelessness, family, and belonging when we must also be so distant from one another? Well, the journey begins and the answer is among us. Muchas gracias a todos. Irina, I hand to you.
Yes, we're gonna begin the Q&A section. So I'm gonna speak in Spanish and then ask for them to submit their questions, okay?
Great.
Was, I'm sure the interpreter translated. And now we will move on to the Q&A session. Since this is a webinar, we ask you to please send your questions through the queue and using the Q&A button. So I will be gathering those questions and reading those questions in Spanish so that they can be interpreted to Wendy. So please include your name in your question, also your city or country.
Okay, we have an English question, so I'm gonna go ahead and read it.
Okay.
It's by Ram. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Devine.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Okay, so it says, amazing and inspiring work. Any projects you can talk about that may reflect on our new social distancing challenges, or artists who face these restrictions and overcame them?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. We will go over many of these in the lab, but it's been very interesting to me that every time you open the computer or turn on your phone, we see projects in the everyday flow of life that are now speaking to that challenge. The Zoom has expanded greatly, and artists everywhere are taking to Zoom, looking to build collective voices when no collective production can go on. So we're seeing live television on Zoom from individual people's houses. We are seeing dancers from world-renowned dance companies trying to connect with one another from their different squares. We're listening to symphonies and operas that are coming together from remote spaces. So there are many. And I know many filmmakers as well who are creating new approaches for films in production that are completely changing shape because of the pandemic. And we don't know how it's going to last, but I think just looking around us is the most immediate it's the most immediate solution to where is the art that's going on. We're also seeing a new influx of virtual spaces, like the one we're going to build in the lab, of virtual museum space where you can actually have a walk-through experience with others, look at art and interact with it. So I can't wait to see what keeps happening in the world, but there's a lot. And if you are in the lab, or even if you're not, we'll be posting resources and links and spaces on Facebook and other places where you can find those resources and explore them as well.
Okay, now see Moro, she says, hello, Wendy, I loved your talk. Where can I see more examples of projects like the ones that you discussed?
I think the best place to look is a site that my friends at MIT have put together called Docubase. And the MIT Docubase, it's put up by the MIT Open Documentary Lab. The URL is Docubase, DOCUBASE.MIT.edu. And it is the most thorough collection of interactive social justice nonfiction projects that I think exists out there now. And you can explore the websites and really see the trajectory of the development of new media nonfiction. But also you might want to check out Sundance New Frontiers as well. I was a consultant with the Sundance Institute when New Frontiers began, and there are some extraordinary projects that came out of that lab as well. And that's on the Sundance Institute site.
Okay, now Carlos Carmona from Barranquilla asks, how will the methodology of the work methodology in the workshops work? How is it going to look like?
We're going to talk a lot about that tomorrow, but we have switched from what was going to be a group experience where you would collaborate closely with 8 other artists to create a project. We're now creating, you'll still be in a virtual group for idea sharing and virtual collaboration, but you'll have the opportunity to create solo projects and find connections that can happen because of the virtual nature of the project. We're also going to have to look inward to our experiences of migration as opposed to connecting or more closely with others who are going through it at the border right now, just because of safety issues. But I think the methodology is going to lend itself to creating a model and a blueprint for, we'll create virtually what we then might be able to transport into the world and work with the museum when they open their new space to be able to create community-based work at a later date that we'll get a chance to play with and test out during this month. I hope that's okay.
Now we have a question from Felipe Sepulveda. This is from Sabana Grande. Here in the state of Atlántico, I'm very, I feel a lot about the social injustice. How have you experienced this in art? Have you been able to exercise changes in public policy in favor of the communities?
Well, that's a great question. The potential of art to actually lead to change is something that people talk about all the time. And I have so many projects that we can make, it's hard to make a causal connection, but something that the art does is create the conditions where change can happen. And so I'll give you one example. There was a film that I was working on with some folks called the Revolutionary Optimists. And it was a documentary about kids from a very poor slum area in Calcutta, India. And during the course of the filming, the director realized that these young people did not have water, potable water in their slum. They had 25 miles away, women had to go and walk for the water. And as they were, so that this was a story of these resilient young people, and they were going door to door, collecting information about babies who were born sick, about how long the grandmother had to walk for water, asking public health questions. And the director was so frustrated and saddened by that situation. And so what she did was she came to the Producers Institute with the project. And we brought in an extraordinary data scientist and mobile app designer. And instead of writing data down on yellow pads, we provided mobile devices with an app that when they collected that data, they could send it directly to the legislature, to the government, to report that data for what was going on in their slum. By the end of the trajectory of the film, a documentary film usually takes about 3 years to make at least. Those kids were speaking in front of the Senate to talk about, because they had gotten word of the film. We started letting out little clips of the film as it was happening. And right as the film was being released, they got their first fresh water line into that slum. And it was the power of the stories and the filmmakers working with the activists and the young people to make that happen. And so there's many, many examples of films, interactive projects, apps that intervene in the social structure and start to help create change. Not everyone goes to that far a point, but even just raising awareness of a long-held secret can change how people think. So I'll be glad to talk more about those as well.
Now, Adolfo Garcia Correa from Colombia is part of the Cultural Foundation Territorios Arts Incubator. How can we bring together, or how can we bring these new transmedia narratives to communities so that they feel healed, dignified, and vindicated by art if technology hasn't reached this population, or it's glitchy technology, and oftentimes glitchy technology?
Yeah, that's also an excellent question. The last thing we want these projects to do is to uncover a lack or a gap or create a wound where one does not exist. But artists also have power to potentially bring new resources into communities if they're wanted by folks who are there. Not, it's technology is not usually the answer. The ability to share stories and connect and work collaboratively and co-creatively, sharing power and sharing ideas and intersecting imagination. This is where most change happens. The technology can sometimes facilitate it. And so my feeling about that is, in any community where you work, leave the cameras in the cases, leave the cell phones shut away for a good part of the process, and just be with your people. Build the relationships, get to know them. It's not about the technology. When the stories are ready to rise up, then they will. I mean, do you think the Yawanawa tribe that Lynette was working with had access to virtual reality? Absolutely not. But when they discovered it, the chief of the Yawanawa tribe told Lynette, that's how I want to tell my story. And that story got told to world leaders at the World Economic Forum at Davos, uncovering the plight of the tribe and changing policy and rule around land rights and environment. So I think there is a way to be respectful. There is a way to empower and enable those with whom you're working for their voices to be centered in the decision making, and to think of the art as really in service of those, change up the relationship between artist and subject. Look at those connections, and then the technology you need will come.
Jesus Cortés from Malambo in Atlántico, Colombia. Can we construct historic memory through these virtual channels to make the handcrafts of Colombian tribes and Colombian populations known around the world?
Oh yeah, That sounds like an incredible project. There is so much that photography and film can do to restore historical memory. In the lab, you'll meet, we're hoping to have as a guest Paco de Onis and Pamela Yates, who are the filmmakers behind Skylight Media. They work in Guatemala, Colombia, with many indigenous groups to rise up those stories that have not been told over so many years. And you'll hear firsthand how they were able to do that. And I think I'm really interested in learning from all of you where those gaps are that you feel that these projects could intervene to heal the wounds that exist from there. And we can create, we'll look at what the social problem is, where the gaps are, and how these projects might be able to connect and heal. But I think absolutely, there are many artists currently thinking in those ways, and I can't wait to be able to bring this group in conversation more globally with a lot of other artists who are doing that work.
Nestor Martinez Celis from Barranquilla asked, Wendy, are you not afraid that all of the technological productive apparatus can undermine the richness of a spirituality and the culture and human dimension of artists?
That the technology will undermine the spirituality of the artists?
Yes. Yes.
You know, I think those artists who are, in my experience, those artists who are attracted to technology find some spiritual resonance in working at the edge of what's new and stretching the meaning. That technology is meaningless without the stories imbued and embedded in it. And it's the role of, I think more often than not, it's the technologists who devise the apps and tools that don't really know how they're going to be deployed. But in my mind, the artists, there's no artist that embraces technology that is not at least interested in finding meaning there. I think if you're, for me, that's why I love my phone and I hate my phone, right? But I use my phone to meditate. I don't, it's not my spiritual center, but it can trigger a spiritual relationship to the world, and then you put it away. There is a space for the technology, and then there's a space to be free of it. And I think we need artists to be thinking as deeply as they can about facilitating experiences that get people to that place and get each other to that place without vilifying the technology itself. Because it's not the technology, it's the people and how, I mean, any app that's developed for good can also be used for evil. And so, and how do we protect those most vulnerable? I know artists developing apps to protect those on the front lines, helping trans people find resources so that they don't have to be alone and fewer commit suicide. And so that is a very spiritual journey for them. But at some point in any creative process, you put the tool down and come back to your own internal narrative and connect with yourself and others. And so it's really about process, not so much as product. And we have to interrogate any new technology that comes our way and take what we like and leave the rest, which is why I really don't go towards machine learning and artificial intelligence, because I'm not yet intelligent enough in my humanity. But thank you for that question. I loved it.
Jose Flores, who was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and who's now living in Barranquilla, would like to know how will this migration, there's a movement of Venezuelans going back to who had migrated and now are now going back to Venezuela. So he would like to know, how will this be addressed in the context of the workshop, the returnees?
It's going to be part of the collective narrative. That experience is as valid and valuable as folks coming the other way. The way that the lab is set up is that every meeting that we have together, every workshop, begins with a story circle, and everyone's story comes to the center at some point or another. So we're not here to examine one piece of this experience, one piece of this crisis, one piece of this experience of migration and immigration. It's whatever you bring in to the circle. And your project, maybe you'll find other folks who are moved by your experience and want to explore that. There is no right or wrong. There is no particular issue we're trying to move in a certain way. We're here to discover what's needed. We're here to find the humanity and the experience of migrants, of that feeling of statelessness wherever you come inside of it. And your story is valuable and valid and has deep meaning within the conversations we'll be having.
Daniel Aleman Rubio would like to know, how have you kept such a clear vision regarding projects, and how do you execute them efficiently?
How do I keep a clear vision on projects? You know, maybe the answer to that is that I'm old now, and I have a lot of experience incubating projects along the way. I think the clarity comes from a clarity of purpose. I know I grew up in a Jewish family where this healing the world thing, it has a name. There is the concept of, it's in a word in Hebrew called tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. And as a child, I was asked about every week, what did I do for my tikkun olam? How did I heal the world? By just having a place and a voice in it. So I think as I mentioned in the talk, not every project has to be about that, but to help artists gain a clarity of vision of why this image needs to get made, why this story needs to get told. We're going to talk about that because there's a lot of the process that is unclear. One thing that artists are good at is we're not so focused on finding answers. We're more focused on finding the questions. And if we can be okay to be in the gray area, that's where we really enable people, those people who we used to call the audience. We have a term in the film, in the documentary field, of the people formerly known as the audience. Because now everyone is a maker and a storyteller, and everyone holds a tool of the phone in their hands, at least most people who have the phones. And we have to be okay to be in that gray area. Let's ask questions together and not necessarily find the answers. But thanks for thinking I have clarity. Sometimes I do. but not always.
Now we have a question in English from Valentina Vargas. She's from Medellin, Colombia. She's asking about the incubator. Are we allowed to approach any kind of migration or just the Colombian-Venezuelan exodus?
Well, I could ask Shamshir about that, but in my mind, the Colombian-Venezuelan exodus and what is happening at the Colombian-Venezuelan border is the framing of what we're doing. But I can't imagine, there is no rule that I know of that migration cannot be interpreted in a broader way. And I think the fact that you are an artist from Medellin, and you have a point of view, and you have something to share that is inspired by that framing, I think that will probably be absolutely fine. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Yeah, is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I just wanted to add to what you were saying and offer a more general answer in the context of the program. So this one incubator that's happening, that Wendy is leading in Barranquilla, is one of 6 that are happening globally. And we've run 5 or 6 of these incubators over the past 6 years. So really this is one project in a network of projects around the world. And there are many people, some of them may even be listening in right now to this talk, who are interested in the questions we're asking from their own home locations. So I would say that while the topics that the exchanges address are always localized, and we're always interested in the stories that people bring with them from their experience, and in this case, this moment, this historical moment in Colombia, we're also really interested in the question of how artists address something like migration more generally. And also, how can we compare the experience of migration between Colombia and the United States, which also has its own very distinct conversation about migration. So I think yes to everything would be my answer.
Yes,
we're interested in it in a very general way.
Excellent.
Campo from Colombia would like to know, is there any other projects like the one you showed us that involves music?
That is a very good question. There are a number of collective and interactive video projects that I'll be sharing tomorrow, where their music is an integral part. They're not necessarily about the music of a place, but music of a place is used to deepen an experience of character and conflict. And I'll be showing a few sites where, as you click on short video or click on interactive rooms to go into, the soundtrack of the local musicians is what brings you deeper into the story. But I can also look around and we can come up with, I've been wanting to create a layer to the augmented reality app that so say we build a virtual museum, that a soundtrack is triggered that in a way that responds to the proximity of the body. So imagine if you're walking through a gallery and your avatar, you get close to a sculpture or a painting or an image, and it is your body that triggers a different soundtrack. There's so much that we can do. There's also a number of podcast projects that are audio only that have a deep use of music as well. And anything, if you're in the lab, please bring examples of projects that you know as well, because the sooner we can get to peer-to-peer sharing, the better. So very interested in exploring music-based work as well.
I can point to one more as well. I'm now
Yeah.
inserting myself. But it just so happens that the last incubator that we ran in Colombia, which was in Medellin, used sound primarily as the medium. So I would recommend to anyone who's listening to check that out. If you go to our website, to americanartsincubator.org, you'll find this exchange in Colombia, and then one that was, I think, 2 years ago, 2018, an exchange to Medellin, where the social challenge was peace, and asking the question, what does peace sound like? There's some really interesting group projects responding.
I love that. I love that, Shamshir. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I've been mildly obsessed with TikTok lately, especially with the scale of audience that it can have. And TikTok is really inherently a music and dance platform. And I think there's even just the way that Black Twitter has grown up, there is an indigenous TikTok movement that is extraordinary. And I think we could use TikTok and bust some stuff wide open. So we'll be showing some of those TikToks as well. This is exciting. What happened to Irina? Is she still here?
She might be buried under questions.
Oh, yeah.
A pile that has come in. Let's see if she's still with
No,
us.
but her picture disappeared. Maybe she got
Yes, maybe. Well, she comes back.
Yeah, Felipe, can you see the Q&A?
Let me see.
If you click Q&A, maybe pick up a question there.
I can see.
Yeah, I can pick.
Would you like to go ahead, Felipe?
Sure. There's one here. So this is. Let me tell the audience which question I'll be reading, and I'll read it in Spanish first, and then in English.
Great.
So Lorenzo would like to know, what does the artist think about the condition that we're at right now, even ourselves, who want to discuss the topic or the issue of migration, and we need to stay in lockdown using technology to communicate among ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, that to me is a kind of, that's a challenge and a call to action and a certain kind of poetic framework to what this is all about. The idea, in the face of the pandemic, so many of the other issues of life are changed, erased, shifted. And this pandemic has exposed serious human rights problems, inequalities. And it's during times like these that artists shine a light. And to me, this is the time when artists go to work. And to be able to support those in crisis with stories that can reflect a true, authentic lived experience, can raise awareness around the world of what's going on and shift attention there. And during a time when we must be isolated from one another, we use what we can. You know, I keep getting a memory of a filmmaker from back in the 1980s, a young woman named Sadie Benning, whose early work is exhibited in almost every museum in the world. She did experimental films about her own life in her bedroom with a pixel vision camera that was one of these plug into the wall cameras. And she did as much as she could inside her house. And she was asked at a museum one day, look, I love your films. Why don't you ever go outside? And her answer was simple, was that the cord didn't reach that far. And she had to work within the limitations of what the technology was about and what her world was about. And I think that's what we have to do too. And if bringing connection is our purpose, then we'll think about that. If it's raising awareness of individual stories that are hidden, let's do that. If there's much that we can do collectively and alone that I think rises up our voices and the situation that we're in, and eventually be able to bring it into a more collaborative in-person space when the world not goes back to the way it was, but when we move into the future together.
Okay, so the next question. There is a very similar question here, so I don't know if you dealt with that already or if you want to expand. Ricardo Garcia is asking if you think, I need to read it in Spanish, so please don't answer now. Do you think that it's convenient to reach through technology some communities that have traditionally been healthy and calm? So it's similar to the question that you were asked before. Wendy, so would you like to expand on that? And I can read the question in Spanish?
I'm not sure I understand the question about communities that have been healthy and calm.
Yes, so do you think that it's convenient to bring technologies to communities that, meaning that this technology could disrupt that calm?
Oh, could disrupt the calm? Yeah. I think, no, let me say a little bit more about that.
Okay, so let me read the question in Spanish and I'll let you know when.
Please, okay.
Okay, Wendy, you can go ahead.
Okay. I think it's very important to not what we call parachute into communities, to make projects and take stories out, infect it with technology they might not need or want or have regular access to, and go away. There's a sense of, we talk about extractive filmmaking, where you take stories away, you just spread out. The only thing that's important is your project, and you don't consider that life was fine before you got there, or nobody really wants you there. It's like, we must work, artists who do social practice work need to be invited into the communities that they have a desire to document. And with or without technology, that is there are series of ethics and concerns that we're going to talk about in the lab, because if we were going out to find stories from other people, there's a whole other way of approaching it. And technology is like meaningless if it's not being held by the narratives of the people. And if you're saying, here, use this app for this, or put on this headset, it's ridiculous. And it's not relevant to how people are actually living. And so it puts the artist and the storyteller at odds with the communities that they may be wanting to engage. And so, yeah, I think the fact that people are thinking along those lines is really good. And I hope that we can continue to explore so that the narratives that do rise up are ones that are coming from a truly collective space.
I see that Waldy's joined us as well from
Yes.
Museo.
Hola, Waldy.
Welcome you, Waldy. Bienvenidos. I don't know if at some point, actually, as we near the half-hour mark, I think, and wrap up, we can take a few more questions, I would imagine. But before we wrap up, it would be great to hear from you, Waldy, as well, if you'd like to say anything on behalf of the museum. But I wanted to add a comment to what you were saying, Wendy, about this question, around technology and bringing it into communities as a disruptive force. It's something that we've thought about a lot from the perspective of the American Arts Incubator program as well, more generally. And I think it's worth saying that one of the ways we think about it and one of the ways we hope to be bringing technology and artists who know how to use these tools into community is in a spirit of sharing, of skill sharing, so that the tools that, like you said, can be oppressive, can be used to harm communities, are tools that people are familiar with, and that, there's a saying in English, at least, we must learn to program or we will be programmed. And that is something that, I think resonates with this question as well, that there is a way in which, through bringing technology to a community or to an individual who you're working with on a project, you can together learn not only about the story that's being told, but also about how to work with this new tool in a new way, in a creative way, and in a way that is empowering to those who are participating.
Yep, I love it.
So let's see if Felipe has another question.
Felipe, any more there? Feel so bad that Irina was bumped off somehow.
Yeah, there's many questions here, actually.
Good, please.
Well, there's like 4 more, maybe.
Great. I think we can manage. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the question in Spanish first and then come back.
Sí.
So this question is by Gilberto Romero Sierra. He wants to know, are there any projects that combine or that create a symbiosis between education and teaching and the history of pre-Columbine Americas, of the pre-Columbine, I guess he means America at large, like the continent in this case?
So combine education and the history of the U.S.?
No, pre-Columbine and like pre-Columbia.
So this is history, before
Columbia.
Yeah.
Got it. I am not as up on historical documentary, but I know that there's a good amount of content, historical content available through public media stations that has been created that are not only films and videos, but also websites that explore. We've done some research on websites that are embedding video in new ways and photography in new ways. Frankly, I don't think there's a lot, but certainly from our friends in Canada at the National Film Board, some US, some in Mexico, there have been experimentations with form and framing, but I'd have to do a little more research for that specifically. And if you're in the, and I will do that, if you are in the lab, we can definitely get to that this weekend. I can show you some examples, because I have to say the teachers so many of the teachers that we have worked with have jumped into new media and become trained in coding, in interactivity. And even if their classrooms are not outfitted, they will at least have the ability to navigate the software so their students can create the stories that don't yet exist. Teachers are amazingly resilient when it comes to that. And I do have a few examples of teacher created and student created sites that may not get the history exactly right, but they do get the experience of folks in community doing as much learning as they can. I don't know, I'm sure if you know any others that might exist.
I do have one example to share.
Please.
I just wanted to remember the name. That's right. So this is another American Arts Incubator artist who traveled to Ecuador to lead an incubator there. And she was working, her name is Beatrice Glow. She's from New York City. And she was working with the indigenous community of Otavalo, outside, a couple hours outside of Quito. And she herself had done a bunch of work with indigenous communities near New York. One of the projects that they produced together that I'm reminded of in thinking about pre-Columbian history and storytelling was a project called Mannahatta Vr. So if you search Beatrice Glow or Mannahatta Vr, you'll find this amazing project, which is essentially a retelling of the cosmology of the indigenous people of New York, of the island that is now New York City. So Mannahatta, which of course sounds like Manhattan, the word that we've attributed to the island,
right,
is what the indigenous people called the island before. And with this VR project, you can actually walk down a street in Manhattan and using your phone, using a VR device, using a Google Cardboard, you can experience a world that's an invented world, but it's an invented world. It's a piece of narrative fiction, I guess you could say, historical fiction, telling the audience about what it was like to be there, some of the stories that are part of that cosmology. So that's a great project to check out.
beautiful, thank you.
Okay, should we keep on going? They're still coming in.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna end it.
How
a
many
half
do you
hour.
want to?
Let's do 2 more.
Okay.
And the others, if we don't get to their question, we can have them hold it. We can absolutely answer them tomorrow. Have them, write it down or email. We can. I'm happy to answer more questions remotely. But let's do 2 more.
Okay, Wendy, so I'm going to read again. Yeah, I will read it in Spanish first and come back.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. So my internet failed for a while. I don't know if this was asked already. I find your work and your projects to be very inspiring. Her name is Alison Cupavan. Everything is art, she says. You discuss healing and repairing. Could you talk a little bit about a project that was particularly healing or repairing?
God, there's so many. Well, starting back, I'll speak from my personal experience first. I'll give you 2 examples. So the film that I mentioned in my talk called Naomi's Legacy, was based on home movie footage that my grandfather shot in Brooklyn. And to be very transparent with you all, my grandfather was not a very nice man, and he did not treat my mother and my aunt very well. There was violence in my family and abuse that I did not know about. And my mom was not well. We were just not doing well as a family. But in the process of creating these images, of watching them together, of telling the stories, of re-photographing and actually reclaiming the narrative that my grandfather had tried to control, it healed us. My mother stopped drinking. She became a parent again. She dealt with her demons. And it was an extraordinary experience for her to be able to step into her truth and for me to understand a family that I had really, a family story that I had never known. And so I knew because I experienced that personally, that as I worked with other filmmakers moving forward, I am consistent. I see there's a group that I work with as the second example called Skylight. And I mentioned them as well. They are based in New York, do a lot of work in Colombia, in Mexico, in Guatemala. And they did a film called Granito about the Guatemalan genocide. And they don't teach the Guatemalan genocide in the schools. In Guatemala, 70% of the community there is under 30, and they don't teach that history. That is a huge wound that needs to be navigated. But through the film, which was translated into indigenous languages and brought to communities and shared, there was a communal healing of finally seeing and understanding their own history because they were able to participate in it. And in the film, you see that just the excavation of the stories and the bones of those people who had been disappeared. And it was an extraordinary process. And so I think if artists come to these projects with an intention to tell the best story that they can and create an experience that can help move people and open it up for whatever is going to be felt, the possibilities are endless. And there are so many more examples that I'll be happy to collect and share over the next month for sure. And hope that we can make some together as well. One more, I think. Yep.
Yes, this is the last one from Medellin, and I will read it in Spanish and come back.
Thank you, Felipe.
Okay, so this is Daniela Echeverri from Medellin. She's asking, do you believe that you can heal the world from healing yourself? We're starting with healing yourself. And have you worked in projects or with projects in the lab that work from personal experiences? And can personal experiences have a social resonance?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely think that they can. There is, for me, before I could become the artist I became, I had to work out a lot of personal angst And I learned that the most personal stories, you might think they won't resonate, but they do. And the film that actually put my career on the map was a short experimental project that I made about many years of trying to conceive a child and not being able to. And I didn't think I was going to show it to anyone. It was a private thing. I had to heal my grief, my own personal experience. And someone showed it to someone who knew someone at the Sundance Film Festival. And that was the film that got into Sundance. I didn't even submit it. It played around the world. Lincoln sent, I mean, it's the film that was my most successful to date. And it was so personal. I was so embarrassed at first. And yet people came out of the woodwork to share their stories. And it was a small thing, but wanting to have a child is a universal experience. I wasn't trying to say what it was for everyone, but I think the way that we're going to work on migration and all of the issues going on in Colombia and Venezuela and at the border, and the experience of being there at the border, is that now, especially, we must work from personal experience. We cannot do research with others. We cannot go deeply into other communities with our bodies and our microphones. And I know for sure, one thing I do know for sure, is that the more willing we are to lay bare our own process and our own discoveries and our own truths, the more audiences will resonate and the more we'll be able to share. Because it's like we need to avoid platitudes of this is how it is. Saying this is how it is for me and for us, the proximity of the projects are going to speak volumes about what we're trying to explore. So I'm really looking forward to going deep with you all.
That's a really lovely note to end on.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard about this film either. Now you piqued my interest.
Now I'll have to share it with you. Yeah, the link is coming.
Well, before maybe I'll make some closing comments, but I'd like to invite Wendy if you have anything you'd like to share on behalf of the museum as well. We're happy to have you here with us.
Yes, thank you, Shamsher, and good night, everyone. I apologize because I came a little bit late. I had some technical difficulties, but the important thing is that we're here now. On behalf of the Museum of Modern Art, Barranquilla, and the staff, I would like to thank the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs of the Department of State of the United States, 01, cultural organization leading the American Arts Incubator, for trusting in the museum for the 2020 edition of this program. Obviously, we'll welcome Wendy, who's the artist responsible of leading this digital art media project, and the Laboratorio de las Fronteras. Also, the 32 participants that have been chosen to be part of this process, which constitutes an artistic creation and collective construction exercise. American Arts Incubator sends a group of American artists abroad each year to collaborate with local communities from each country, promoting an exchange of knowledge during the incubator that lasts for approximately 1 month. Well, as Shamsher mentioned, this year, the typical methodology of the program has been interrupted, as many other global dynamics, by the effects of COVID-19, which made it impossible for Wendy to come to Colombia. However, this situation has turned into an opportunity to create a novel methodology that's 100% virtually structured, generating resources and tools that enable the group of participants to develop a series of educational actions. I would also like to thank the Colombian American Chamber of Commerce and its director, Ms. Victoria Ibanez. They have contributed from the beginning to this initiative. We also would like to join 01 in saying that we're here to help the American Arts Incubator program, trusting that this will be an unforgettable experience for all the allies, the participants, and that will yield some fantastic artistic projects.
Can't wait.
And we, of course, trust that the output from the artist will be great. So all the best to you all.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Waldy. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Wendy. It's
Oh,
really been lovely experience to join this part of the experience. It's something that we normally don't get to experience because we're here based in,
right.
one is in San Francisco, California, of course. So we're far away from these moments. So one benefit of being virtual is that we do get to gather in this way.
Yes.
Thank you to everyone who joined as well through the Facebook live stream or through Zoom. If you're on Facebook, if you'd like to share thoughts about what you've seen, or if you have additional questions, we can answer them there. So feel free to comment on the thread. Feel free to send additional questions in to us here through the Zoom Q&A link as well. And we'll either get to them in the workshop tomorrow, if you're one of the workshop participants, and we'll be seeing Wendy again. And if you're a member of the public out there in the world listening in, please feel free to be in touch with us at 01 through Facebook, or you can email us at info@01.org as well. So I encourage everyone to follow along. The exchange will be sharing, the participants in the incubator will be sharing their work on the Facebook group, American Arts Incubator Colombia. And then at the end of the month, we'll be having an open house where the participants will be sharing the projects that they've developed. So please keep an eye on the Museo's Facebook page, on their website, and join us again at the end of the month.
Fantastic. Thank you all. And thank you, Felipe, for the translating.
Yes, thank you, Felipe.
Okay. Adios.